Great. Well, welcome. Welcome to Future Talks and welcome to New Relic. By a quick show of hands, can I just see who, is this your first time here at New Relic? Ooh, well, welcome. Let's do one more quick show of hands. Who here is an employee of New Relic? Excellent. Welcome, Relics. This is one of my favorite nights of the month because this provides us with a great opportunity to have really interesting conversations about what's happening in the tech field. I'm Erin Dietrich, and I lead our community impact initiatives here at New Relic. Many of you, I think, have been here for different events because we actually host typically 4 different events every week here after hours, which is part of our commitment to being able to be involved with all different kinds of organizations who are operating here in the Portland community. So thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we're so thrilled that you're joining us for this conversation. We have a great chat tonight that's going to be between Jim Gochee, our Chief Product Officer, and Tom Krazit from GeekWire. So I'm going to give some quick bios of our speakers and then turn it over to them so we can get into the conversation. Jim, as I said, is our Chief Product Officer. He oversees the teams that design, build, and deliver our products. Those teams are almost all actually located here in this building. We have 400 employees now working here in New Relic in Portland, which is amazing to be a part of every day. Jim has led our Portland office and our R&D headquarters here since we started in 2008. And so you might notice there's a theme tonight of our 10th anniversary. Jim has a passion for building world-class products, and he loves technology, especially when it's well-architected, scalable, and fast. He takes great pleasure in helping our customers analyze their technology and build great digital experiences. Before New Relic, he held technology leadership roles at Wiley Technology, which is a division of CA, and at an internet-based trading system for the wholesale food industry. Tom Krazit is GeekWire's cloud and enterprise editor. He's covered the technology sector for news organizations like IDG, CNET, and paid content before he started serving as the executive editor of GigaOM and the Structure Conference series. He has spent a decade writing and editing within the fast-changing and vital technology industry and covering some of the most important trends of our time. From those bios, you can tell this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I'm thrilled to hear all the ins and outs of the journey of New Relic, and I can't wait to get into it. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Tom and Jim.
Thank you, Erin. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. Thumbs up? We're good, okay. No, oh yeah.
That button?
Okay.
Hey, we didn't blow up or anything. Well, thanks everybody for coming out on such a beautiful evening in Portland. We wanted to start off, we're going to talk about a couple of things tonight, but we wanted to start off to talk a little bit more about Portland. And I'm kind of curious about the story of how New Relic came to be in Portland. You know, San Francisco headquartered company with such a significant presence here. Can you sort of take us through how that came to be and why we're here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I relocated to Portland, moved here about 15 years ago. And I grew up on the East Coast, but always felt like I was a West Coaster at heart. And you know where I'm coming from? And so I landed my first job on the West Coast, but it was actually in the Bay Area. It was I worked for Apple. It was like my dream job. And so I did that for 4 years. Then I got married, moved to Wisconsin for about 6 years, and the Midwest wasn't quite for that experience.
I have yet to try.
Okay, so wonderful place, wasn't the West Coast. And so moved to Portland. Didn't really want to go back to the Bay Area. Really just struggled a bit with the cost of living and how crowded it was. And so fell in love with Oregon. And I had spent the summer windsurfing in Gorge when I was in college. Just really, really fell in love. So I moved back 15 years ago. Didn't have a job. And so when I started to look for work, couldn't find anything in town. This was 2002, so it was right after the first internet bubble burst. That was 2002. And so I tapped into my network, which was primarily people in the Bay Area, and I got a job with Riley, which was our CEO's first month. And so that's how I started in Portland. And then we grew to a few people from Wiley, that got bought by Computer Associates. We started New Relic, and so I was already here for that. So we started with an office in San Francisco with New Relic and an office in Portland, really right from the very beginning.
What did Lou say when you said, I want to run an office out of Portland?
Well, he came to me and asked, would you run an office for me in Portland? So I said I absolutely would. He fell in love with Portland. So again, back at his previous company, we'd had the office here and really loved coming up here. He loved the people that we had working in the office at that time. And so this was also back when it was becoming acceptable to have remote work, right? And so in part of my career, I've telecommuted. And then I think it was about 15 years ago, it became much more commonplace to actually build companies that were distributed. So in his mind, he was kind of building a distributed company, San Francisco, as well as Portland. And so he was very comfortable.
I was wondering if that was controversial with your investors, or like you're going to put, this huge important office so far away from the friendly confines of the Bay Area.
Well, it's a funny story. So I don't know, for those of you who know Peter Fenn, so he was Benchmark. He funded Twitter, Uber, and many others. And he flew up here with Lou to try to convince me to join New Relic. He loved Portland and really just likes kind of the artisan quality, focus here and how people are so dedicated and committed to the craft, which you don't necessarily always find in the Bay Area. So yeah, no, the VCs right from the beginning.
So you've had quite an arc when it comes to Portland and tech and business, and you've seen a lot of changes, I'm sure, not just in the business community, but just in Portland in general. How does Portland in 2018 compare to when you guys started operating an office here? And, what are some of the most significant that you've built?
Well, it is in many ways it's quite different, although in ways it's also. It was unheard of to do anything really big in Portland back in the early days. So 10 years ago, I remember I talked to Mike Rodaway from the Oregonian, and Mike said, I think you're the only company, Jim, that has their R&D headquarters. And I actually didn't really fully appreciate significance. Software R&D headquarters from the San Francisco-based company. So what you tend to see in Portland is outposts, maybe their technical support or quality assurance or things like that. But to have the full research and development team based here was very unusual. And now, fast forward to this day, it actually still is relatively unusual for a San Francisco or Bay Area-based company to do that. However, the tech scene is exploding. And a lot of companies now, I feel like in the early days of New Relic, it was a little trickier to recruit people to move here because, are you going to uproot maybe your family, move to a location where things don't work out? What are your alternatives? So you need a robust employer base if you're going to relocate. And now I feel like there's enough opportunity in town where it's a lot easier to have that discussion.
What percentage of your hires for this office come from Portland as opposed to coming from somewhere else?
Yeah, well, that's the other interesting thing. I think it's been consistent almost over the 10 years of our history. About 50. So about 50% of the people we hire were, already working locally. And, some of them may have been remote workers, but they were here and they were working in tech. And then I would say about 50% are people who really wanted to move here, sort of fell in love with the place, but weren't going to do it until they had a job, right? And so that tends to be the kind of person. We don't really go out and recruit heavily for people to move here. They've already decided Portland's a place for them. They're tracking on the job boards, looking for opportunities, and then if they can find the right one, then they'll relocate.
What are given that you're a San Francisco-based company, I'm sure you have a lot of insight into the people who work down there, the people here. What are the differences? Is there a different kind of person who works for New Relic in San Francisco as opposed to a person who works for New Relic?
No, I think the people that we have in the R&D group, we have a similar caliber engineer, designer, product manager in both locations. And I think what's different is more cultural, right? And it goes to the culture of Portland and the culture of the Bay Area. And since I worked there, I sort of lived in that culture, and I get it. The culture there is much more work-oriented. And it's, much more, people really invest very, very heavily, kind of go all in for years, and maybe spend a lifetime in tech and almost kind of, lose track of other things. And I think it's much more well-rounded in Portland. People are maybe a little more socially conscious here. Work-life balance is more important. Stock option package. The area is pretty good for me. Stock option package. Maybe I'll job hop every 2 years, spread my bets out. Over these companies, right? Where in Portland,
you got to wait 4 years to vest.
True, but you vest every year, so you can if you really want to hedge it, you have two, like playing the roulette wheel or something in Vegas, which is really it's not healthy. I'm not recommending doing that. So I think in Portland, it's much more about the craft and enjoying the work, people that you work with. But again, actually, I mean, we really hire very similar talent in both offices, and we have other offices too. We've got a great office in Phoenix, Arizona, and a large and growing office in Barcelona.
And I feel like every time I have a conversation about Portland tech and the business community, and there's just this underlying frustration at the top. And I don't really know where this comes from, how people address this, but there seems to be like this frustration within a lot of people I talk to, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and developers as well, that there's so much great stuff here in Portland, so many great people, so many great ideas, but there's less activity in terms of startups, in terms of growth, I guess, than you see in San Francisco or Seattle. And, as someone who's been here for as long as you have, what do you think about that?
Do you ever read that book? So it is. It's a catch-22. It's getting better, and I think where Portland really shines is there are companies that bootstrap themselves. And the beauty of technology, especially if it's pure software, is that you can bootstrap. You can use the cloud to deploy your idea, get it out much more inexpensively than before when you had to provision servers and put them in a data center. And so I see like a vibrant group of young companies who do struggle to get funding, but then just like it's classic like startup in the garage, and they're going to bootstrap it themselves. And if those companies become successful and then get to a certain point, they will attract that. So for example, I know that some of the VCs now will only invest if you've got 1 to 2 million in revenue. That's a really hard bar for a startup to reach. Essentially, you're kind of almost there. If you can get 2 million in revenue without taking funding, why even take that point? So, well, certainly it eliminates a category of higher risk, and that's the bar.
That's what venture capital is.
Well, and it is, but it's a whole spectrum, right? And so there is even a need for venture capital at the 2 million range, right? But so you don't really get as much early stage stuff. Here, the investors they just want less risky investments. And so, yes, it's a bit of a structural issue why there's not more, but I don't think it should stop anyone. I mean, if someone's got a great idea, I think they should pursue it. This is the day and age. I mean, tech is very, very hot. The world is transforming digitally, right? Every company's got a digital transformation thing going on, global thing going on. And so if you've got an idea in tech, we're all like, no, don't hold back. There's no better. But you might have to do something. That's the way Silicon Valley started in the early days, is everything was bootstrapped. And so that'll have to happen here.
It feels like there needs to be like one big homegrown company, in terms of this huge success, and to start spinning off people left and right after they've been filed in the public or if they action. I think we saw this with Elemental to some extent, and we'll see how that plays out over the years. But it seems like there needs to be more and more companies. And I wonder if the lack of interest in risk taking among some of the capitalists. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly people that do make money in tech and stay in Portland and want to be angel investors or they want to start their own company. That's one way. So, if the tech economy stays strong and there are companies, like you see Puppet, Ranks, we've got a number of them through Relic. And so, yeah, it takes time, but it will build and it will have momentum.
Okay. Well, I mean, I hope to see more and more growth in Portland. We'll see how it goes. I did want to shift gears slightly because you're in part to talk about DevOps and about how New Relic has also gotten religion, I guess, with respect to DevOps and transformed the way it organizes its IT operation, thinks about how developers should be more productive and working more closely with the operations staff. Tell me a little bit about that. How did you get started with that, or why did you get started? Why did you see a need for that back when you did get started, and how did that occur?
Yeah, I mean, I talk to companies all the time that are in the middle of this journey, and I think our journey through it was very similar. So we started out, even though we were a startup, we actually kind of had a traditional ops and dev split. And we had one guy, Dave Peterson, who works at the company. He was our one operations guy, and he took call for everything. He was on call 24/7.
What year is this?
Would have been 2010, 2009. And that was fantastic in that the development team never had to take the pager. And if anything broke, Dave got called and Dave would fix it. And you'd be grumbly the next morning. But it quickly became too much because we kept growing and hiring more engineers. And then Dave wouldn't know why things broke.
What was the size of the company?
That was probably around 100 people total, and maybe 30 in a development team. And so Dave could no longer keep track of the software, and we would deploy quite frequently. Most startup companies did at that time. And so it just became obvious that you couldn't have someone be on call for the software that some other team wrote. And so we didn't quite, we were a little bit of a laggard. We still stuck with a model, so we added a few more people to Dave's team and then a few more. And then finally, I kind of remember this because it was very dramatic with development teams. We got to the point where we said, we have to switch how we do this. It's not working. Development teams have to take all for the services that they build. So they build and operate those services, at which point you have to change how you do operation, right? It all kind of comes together. And then you tend to have, software-driven operations and sort of all those things that come in with DevOps. But for me, one of the signs of where you're really at is who's taking the paper. Is it a development team supported by specialists, perhaps, like we're operations people, but they're on the development, and they tend to be coding operations as opposed to toiling, or you still have a segmented operations team, separate development team, right? And so we did get to that point where we had to move to that. And every company I talk to is somewhere in that journey. Every large enterprise I talk to, whether it's General Electric or even IBM. Airbnb's been doing this since the beginning, right? But big banks, Nationwide Financial, they're all trying to figure out how to get their development teams move faster, take operational responsibility, and move more to a DevOps.
So what does this look like now, besides New Relic? And can you give us a sense too of like how many people possibly?
So there's about it's like between 350 and 400 people who work in the product organization. But that includes product managers, designers, as well as engineers, site engineering. We still have a centralized site engineering team, certain levels added into our development teams. We have about 50 development teams. And each one of those development teams will take pager calls at any time. We've got about 50 on call for different parts of the service.
How long is the shift? How long do you expect?
Well, truthfully, I don't know. Is there anyone from New Relic here? Yell it out.
Too long, it seems.
A week. That's a very long time.
Is that?
And I've taken pager call back in the day, and I know how disruptive it is your entire week once you get woken up. So it is very traumatic. Big responsibility.
Is there a way to reduce that?
There is. So we just had, it's interesting, we found someone at Google who got really excited about what we were up to. So one of the Google SRE men and talked to us about how they run, how they operate. And has anybody read the Google? It's a great, fantastic book. Yeah, I'd recommend reading it. Not that you can necessarily follow the Google SRE pattern because no one's as big as Google, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And I would say for me, the important thing is the full ownership of the field for the quality of that production, right? When the people that build the code know that they have to operate. And so when you look at like what's a model beyond this, it's a model where there's probably another team who's taking frontline call, but still the developer feels that full ownership for it, right? Because going all the way back to the way it was, development teams didn't feel ownership, operations teams were getting slammed with call and production outage issues. And so you try to bring that closer together. And so, for example, I know that some companies say, if you can follow these operational guidelines, service that you wrote, your uptime is good enough, you can hand it over to a central team. Okay, that then means the development team is off. If that service starts to have issues, back it goes. And so that's something that we've just started to talk about. We're working on happy to hear that. That's just something we're starting to talk about, is how we might be able to move to a model where some of our services are actually, the call is made by a centralized team, assuming certain parameters.
Most people I've talked to about this issue describe it as kind of an organizational issue, like not so much about technology, more about how you structure a group and partner. But I was wondering, are there any technologies that have made this easier, tools or I don't know.
Well, there is one tool in particular I'm very fond of.
Walk into that
one. No, actually, especially for development teams, to have a tool like Relic, which was kind of designed originally for development teams and then also very well suited for operations teams, those two personas, it really helps a lot because the truth is when there is an issue, you have no idea what's wrong. You're burning a lot of time sorting through log files or looking at source code, but really not sure why something's broken. I mean, that's a killer, right? So having good production tooling, really having good data is really critical to making this game.
Have you changed anything though in terms of like the languages that you use or deployment?
It's funny you say that. So our history with Ruby. We were talking about that earlier. So yeah, when we started, we went all in on Ruby on Rails, and we had this idea that it was going to, it's the programming language of the future, and it would replace Java, and it didn't, which is fine. So a lot of our system is still built with Ruby, but over time we've been porting more of it to Java. Java really is the bulletproof, high scale technology. Some of our stuff is written in JavaScript, and so we are seeing some high performance services, asynchronous style services in JavaScript. But I would say a little bit ago, but I would say for the most part it's
And you're running a hybrid infrastructure on the back end. Yeah. Your own infrastructure that you're managing as well as AWS, I believe, that you're using for some of those things.
Yeah, that's right. And so what's also interesting, even though I think Progressive kind of in the same position as a lot of our enterprise customers, in that they have stuff on premise, stuff in their own data centers, and we have a lot of that, and as well as stuff running in the cloud. And we try to sort of match and find the right place to host and run our different services. We love the cloud, flexibility offers. At the size and the scale that we're at, though, some things just are not cost effective, not for us, because we run a pretty lean center. So usually where the bulk of our data resides, data center, and then a lot of sort of ancillary or additive stuff. And that tends to work.
Okay. Do we want to throw it open to a few questions? Does anybody have any questions for Jim? I think there's
we got a question back.
We've got some mics going around. Way in the back. Almost mounted.
Hey, so this year at OSCON, I couldn't help notice that Kotlin was one of the major topics that they're going to be talking about. And I was just curious if you have any opinions on that language and or the future of it. Kotlin, yeah.
Kotlin. So Tom, tell me your viewpoint on Kotlin.
You spell that?
I'm actually not sure. So
yeah, sorry, I don't exactly know what you're talking about.
Any other questions? We can keep going. Okay. Hey, go ahead.
Oh. Okay.
Jim, hi, thank you. I had a question on, you've been on this journey for quite a while with our CEO here at New Relic. What keeps you coming to the office every day in terms of your role here, what the company is doing, et cetera?
I mean, they pay you.
Yeah, they do pay me still. Yeah. I don't know. I think I've got the best job. And what's incredible to see is just this digital, I call it the digital revolution that's happening out in the broader market. Every company's got a digital strategy and trying to connect with their customers digitally. Obviously, the phone is a big part of that. But if I think about all some really interesting digital projects, like mobile pre-order for three of the very, very high-profile food services companies we work with, digital streaming initiatives and media, all these we're part of it. And we get brought in to help those teams be successful. And so when I'm out on the road visiting these companies, I just want to learn about what are they up to, what's their business strategy, what's their technology transformation strategy, how are they going to make their teams more agile, how are they going to do this cultural change that they're trying to embark on. And, they're asking me questions. Well, how do you do it? Tell me how you organize. So I just feel like it's an incredible, we have this incredible seat at the table at each one of our customers, watching them do some pretty amazing things. And that's very satisfying for me personally to feel like I can be a part of all this. So I listen.
Yeah, that's true.
Greg Fisk, I have two questions. Well, one is, are you actually, I guess I should have read the 10K, but are you making revenue on consulting as well as on product licensing? It's sort of a freemium model, right? And the second question is, to what extent are you seeing mobile digital transformation happening? And what do you see as trends in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, most companies in the enterprise space will make about 10% of their revenue from services. That could be installing a product or customizing, or integrating, very common. We're actually closer to about 1 or 2%, believe it or not. And so we've always tried over the years to have the product experience just work with very little customization, installation, configuration required. And I think this was a little bit of a radical idea 10 years ago with enterprise software, that it would actually just work out of the box. And we had this, our selling playbook, the selling motion was get the user to try the product. And that was the motion. And once they tried the product, usually they liked it. And so we're a little bit unique in the enterprise software space in that we really don't have a large service to our revenue, which is great financially, because the problem with services revenue is offset by cost of delivering the service. So make 10 million and then you spend 10 million, making the 10 million, and you don't really get it. So it's not a leverage revenue stream. And then the second part of your question. Yeah, mobile. It is actually a pretty big thing going on out there. But what's interesting to me is it's still relatively immature. So I joke and jest. Obviously, mobile is huge, but it's still, still a lot more than I would like. It's built by an outside consulting firm who builds a mobile app, hands it over to a company, and then never continues to develop it. And so, a few years ago, I started to see a trend where people were bringing mobile development, but they were struggling to do that just because of the economics of those developers. Mobile developers were in really high demand, and so they could make far more money working consultancies where they would go do these $2 million mobile app projects. And they just sort of keep banging these things out. So they were all making a lot of money. And no one really wanted to go work, for Bank of America for $150,000 a year. They can make all this money consulting. And then, what's even more interesting is when I talked to the head of operations for a company, and I would say, how do you keep an eye on what's going on with these mobile apps? So yeah, we have no idea. I don't even know if it's my job to tell whether these mobile apps are functioning. These are mobile apps that are driving, in some of our customers, driving billions of dollars of revenue. The mobile app, no one even in operation knows what it means to monitor these things. Are they running successfully?
Can you give us some examples of customers who are not?
Absolutely not. I can tell you, it happens out there. And so, but I think there is a maturing, because again, there are a lot of dollars off providing. So I just think it's the immaturity of mobile and how to operate and monitor and tooling. But mobile is red hot right now.
Can you talk about how China is driving your business?
Yeah, China is really interesting. And a lot of tech companies are honestly in the same boat with China. So first of all, I don't know if people realize this, you can't operate a business in China. Anyone know that? Yeah, a lot of heads, which makes it a very odd market. And so you have to partner with a Chinese company to even operate. And then if you're going to operate, let's say we were to operate our service there, we would have to give the Chinese affiliate a complete copy of all of our source code. Which actually I think they already have, because there's a Chinese knockoff of New Relic, by the way. I don't know how they got it. And so, yeah, China's a really tricky market, and a lot of tech companies don't do much or struggle through partnerships. I've also heard, for example, that the internet link between, say the U.S. and China, it can be really fast one day, and the next day it's not, because they're probably scanning all the traffic. And so we've actually had it as a corporate policy. We do not do business in China. No story.
Have you tried, or have you just had that policy?
No, we don't even try. Part of it too is for example, if I was to go to China and was arrested, what's the rule of law like, right? And so are we willing to put our employees at risk in a country where people get thrown into jail? I mean, so it's an interesting market, and a lot of people don't scare anybody away from China, but we've decided at this point that China is not yet for us. I mean, I think it's got to change something. I think China has to get on board with rules and the laws of the rest of the world, including copyright protection, human rights issues, and everything else, business sovereignty, all that. And they're just not.
You had a question over here. Aaron.
So in terms of people, you guys have grown quite a bit last recent years. So scaling up versus scaling out, and do you guys find yourself constantly reorganizing, the org structure, or are you using something that scales nicely? I'm just curious to hear how that journey has been, because we're kind of dealing with that right now.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, you do. You have to reorganize almost continually as you reach new levels of size. And it's kind of obvious if you think about it. The way we organize 10, 50 is different than the size we're at, and everybody goes through it. We're at again around that 350 to 400 mark. I talk to CIOs that are at the 3,000 mark, and their organizational challenges are very different. So absolutely. One of the things that we did, it's a pretty interesting story, is we went through a really in-depth reorg and rethinking of how we build software. We went through that about 2.5 years ago. And we got to the point where the previous way that we were structured wasn't working, and we could just feel it because our velocity and what we were releasing to the market, our velocity was down substantially. And that's the worst place to be in as a technology leader. The more people you add, the slower things go, right? But it's like gridlock in downtown Manhattan. You just can't put any more cars through when the system is like that. And so you really do have to think deeply about how to clear the path for teams. Like if you just take a team-centric approach, say, what are they getting stuck on? And you go in and try to remove as many of those obstacles as you possibly can. Try to give teams as much local autonomy as you can, right? While still having some control system for things that need to get swarmed on by everyone. Like if we're going to go through and do a big security push or role-based access controls, we need every team to do some work. So, putting a coordination system into place. But we've kind of really had to reorg almost every couple of years. And actually, at this point, I don't really think we have to reorg in a major way again. We sort of figured out how to kind of clear the lanes for teams. And also like have our product management organization just communicate very clearly to the engineering team. So we kind of clear the lines of communication, streamlined teams in terms of do they have what they need to get their job done, or do they have to wait for a block? Remove as many of the blocks as we can. And that's how we sort of the initiative was to get agile at scale. It's easy to be agile when you got a couple teams. How are you agile as a company with 50 teams, all depending on each other, right? That's a much bigger challenge.
So I think we have to let people refill their beers pretty soon. But I did want to, just to sort of wrap things up here, can you give me three emerging technologies that you think are going to be crucial to the future of New Relic product development?
Okay, the top one is super easy. So containerization with Kubernetes as the orchestration.
Are you running that in production at the moment?
Well, we made the bet on the content. So we chose Mesos over Kubernetes. This is before the just kind of fell toward Kubernetes. So we're looking at what we're going to do there. But we have an orchestration technology. It's very similar, and obviously containerization. So that's a big one. Second would be serverless, like things like Lambda, AWS Lambda. And third technology, I would say Lambda. I'm going to be a little broader. I would say all of the platform services that Amazon has putting out over the last couple of years is really changing how people build software. So these are things like Aurora, all of the data analytics services, things like the Alexa service, and Lambda ties into that. But how software is built in the next 10 years is very different now than how it was previously. And so that's one of the big initiatives we've got underway right now is to really study our solution, which was built more for how software got built, and really trying to understand deeply how software is changing, how New Relic's going to be.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your insights. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight, and we'll be hanging out for a while. I think.
Yeah, feel free to come on up. Great.
Take care.